I'm Erin.
And I'm an architect, but I've spent the last 20 years of my life dedicated to designing workplaces. So today we're going to talk about whether or not trendy offices really are great places to work.
And as Ree mentioned, I've spent 15 years working in human resources, but my primary area was in really helping people understand how to attract, retain, and develop the best talent.
The design of workplaces is becoming an ever greater factor in the consideration of people in terms of why they might join a company or leave a company. And it's not just a consideration in terms of why people might join or leave a company, but it's also become a trendy discussion topic. A lot of people now discuss this, and it's regularly featured in standard broadsheet newspapers, magazines, and there are always lots of articles online about where's the best place to work, what's the coolest office, etc.
Exactly. And along with design, one of the other things that we're really seeing is that there is a movement in the way that workplaces are being defined. And so what people used to really care about when they were applying for jobs were things like salary and benefits. But today, those really aren't at the forefront of applicants' minds. Instead, they're considering things like, will I find a work spouse here? Will I be able to really engage with this community? And is the business that I'm working in a place that's actually going to give back to the community that I'm in? So as Larissa and I were talking about this topic, I think that the place where we really felt like it was important to start was to understand kind of the soul of the business, because that's where it all begins. And for us, that's company culture. And so when we think about defining company culture, we quite simply think that it's actually the personality of an organization. And so a personality of an organization is actually not really developed from the top down. It comes from everyone that's in the company. So each person that comes in or leaves the organization can actually change that culture a little bit. So as we think about some of the things that really make a great place to work, one of the first things that we think about is community. So people want to be able to go into an office space where they feel like they're able to work with people, and that the people that they're working alongside with are carrying weight the way that they are, that they're as engaged as they are, and that they're all making a difference together. Now, this can actually be something that is a little bit difficult to maintain, but there's an organization that does an excellent job of this. So Zappos, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, actually has a really unique policy called the pay-to-quit policy. So once a year, they'll actually pull their employees, and they'll make them consider their level of engagement and their level of positivity towards the organization. And if upon that self-evaluation, an employee finds that they really aren't engaged anymore, they'll actually pay the people to leave the company. Now, it might sound a little bit crazy, but when they've done the research and they've thought about the detrimental impact of disengagement and lack of positivity that happens to the overall organization, they feel like it's something that's very much worthwhile. The next one is trusted leadership. So I think that as humans, it's really important for us all to understand where we're going and why. It's exactly the same in an organization. You have to be able to set the vision for the company and then make sure that people understand where you're going. So having an exciting destination for employees and then a really well thought through roadmap are very key things in order to keep people engaged. What's even better is if you can do an excellent job of communicating that to your employees.
I think it's also important from a leadership perspective, because the leaders are essentially the people who will sign off on the procurement or the construction of the workplace. And therefore, employees have to trust their leaders to build them an environment that is good for them for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day.
That's exactly right. So then what really rounds out a company culture is opportunity. So opportunities for individuals to be able to really grow within the organization. People are very concerned with professional development these days. So making sure that employees know that we've got the roadmap for the organization, and I know how I play into that and how I can continue to grow as an individual are important. One of my former clients is the Estee Lauder companies, and they have a really unique way of doing this. It's a huge global organization with people that are all different levels, right? So you have like the beauty advisors that are working at the Clinique counter, and then you have trainers that come in from the different brands to help them, as well as the C-suite leaders. It was really difficult for them to find exact ways to develop those people. So they implemented a leadership from every chair approach. meaning that each individual person is in charge of their own personal and professional development. It actually is very empowering to the employees because they know that they can actually set their own roadmap for how they want to grow as individuals and then work with their leaders to do this. So while the things we've talked about are really important, we do also consider design important, but one of the things that can happen in an overly designed place or a place that has such a strong aesthetic is it can actually be disengaging or disenfranchising to some people. An organization that takes really good notice of this and makes sure that they don't let that happen is actually the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. So when their founder, Horst Schulze, established the company, he wanted to make sure that the ladies and gentlemen that were working there felt comfortable in these beautiful buildings. He didn't just want to create gorgeous hotels. He wanted to make sure that there was an amazing service experience for the guests that stayed there. So he ensured that the areas that the staff work in were well designed and worked well for them. And then he also implemented the mantra of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And what this actually did was it made the staff peers with the guests, so it enabled them to interact with them on a different level, and it also ensured that the staff was always comfortable working in a luxury setting.
I think this picture is a really good example of how a workplace can actually contribute, or a culture can contribute to a space. And this is an example of a digital agency. And what's really, really interesting about this is one employee. So the employees were great. The culture was great. So when you get that right, that's fantastic. But they were sick of the environment they worked in. They were tired of the white walls. So one employee took it upon himself to change this. And he, in his own personal time, pixelated superheroes. And then asked the company, give me some money to buy some Post-it notes and some glue and some markers. And he encouraged his whole team to redecorate the office. For me, this is good design. This is good workplace because it brings people together and it brings the environment together to create an environment that people will be happy in. So other than this, how else can workplace design contribute? Well, workplace design is great in terms of how it can contribute to creating a culture, as Erin mentioned. But what is important that we have to remember who we are. Because so often I work with clients and they come to me and they say, we've just seen this picture of this workplace. We want our workplace to look just like that. I think, wow, that's great. But is that you? If it was a person and you had somebody come to you as a plastic surgeon saying, I want to look just like this supermodel. Would everyone think that was a little strange? Just a bit. But in the world of corporate workplace, that seems okay. And that's unfortunately the reality of things because people have to go on what they see, and it's a very visually dread thing. And what happens is the management have these great ideas of who they are, or who they'd like to be, or which other company they would like to be. But they forget in that who they really are. And the question I often ask is, have you asked the employees? Yep. And the answer is inevitably, why would we do that? Oh, they'll just give you loads of different answers and make no sense. But the reality is, to create a good workplace, it really has to speak of who the people are, who the company are, what the culture there is. So what we really need to focus on is what employees really want. And the reality is, only 3% of employees want a trendy, funky office with slides and other weird features that aren't really functional. About 12% want somewhere they can go and relax and get a nap if they need to. But 38% really care about the quality of the coffee. So where are we spending our money? What should we be doing? The other thing that I think is really important is about giving people control. So I'm sure you've all been in a situation, or has there been anybody in the situation where they have felt out of control? It doesn't feel comfortable, does it? So I think it's very interesting then when we look at workplace, why we take more and more control away from the people that occupy it. As technology evolves, we develop new technology to take yet more control away. Has anyone in this room, or does anyone in this room, work in an office where they frequently find themselves too cold? Oh my gosh, a lot of you. And can you change that? Can you change the temperature? Can you make it better? Can you make it comfortable for you? Do any of you work in an environment where the lighting is too bright? Or it's too dim? Can you change that? So are we really creating workplaces that are comfortable for people? And, you know, people are so much more productive if they're happy and if they're comfortable. So why are we doing this? Ultimately, to create a good workplace that fosters a good culture, it needs to be a place people want to be. How many people in this room wake up in the morning and think, I can't wait to get to the office? So us as designers are going a bit wrong. Well, there's a couple of people, but yeah. I think, you know, so we need to try harder at this. And the interesting thing is if we don't, as designers, acknowledge it, people will do it for themselves. So as a designer, once upon a time, I really hated people. They were a massive inconvenience in my world. They ruined my designs, wholeheartedly ruined them. I would make something slick and beautiful. In one example, I designed this amazing utility point where they keep printers and stuff. And when I returned to do defects, the occupants had turned it into a Hawaiian bar. Can you imagine my dismay? It had paper pasted all over it. I was just like, oh my God. So, you know, this is what happens. Now I'm a changed person. And I realize the reason they do this is to make it comfortable for them. And so as a designer, I need to learn from this. And I need to engage more with the people, understand what makes them comfortable, and make it good for them.
So then, thinking about these two things, how do we create a great place to work? So the number one thing that you can do is really listen to people. Ask them what they care about, and then actually try to implement it.
At the end of the day, we have to forget this model of one size fits all. We can't put every human being in a box in an office and expect them to perform. We're all different.
The next thing is we really have to remember that offices are communities, right? It's communal space. And what really drives innovation are people that can actually work together effectively.
And as part of that, the designer has to become part of that community, understanding the community, and working with them, and engaging with the people that form that community.
And the other thing that we really have to make sure we're doing is we have to communicate. So a big part of the listening piece is when we hear what people have to say, but as businesses, we decide, we're sorry, we just can't do that change that you want right now because of budget or some constriction like that. We have to make sure that we're communicating that to people. If we're asking them for feedback or for input and then never giving them any feedback on the input that they've given us, they'll eventually stop giving their input.
That's very true. But also in terms of creating a space that supports that, because how do you create a space that supports communication? We love this idea of take everybody out of their offices and dump them in open plan. And yes, that's a great idea because people shut away in offices in isolation aren't communicating. But this idea of a warehouse with endless seas of space makes people feel insecure, on show, on edge. So we really have to think about the scalability of open spaces. Communities happen best when they're small groups of people coming together. So we really need to scale the space to the size of the communities.
And then the final thing is really considering how we're spending the money. And so if we're spending money on trendy things instead of what can really benefit the employees, we're probably doing the wrong thing. I've worked with organizations that actually spent more money on flowers in their businesses than people's development and learning platforms.
I think this is a great picture to emphasize the point. I'm sure we can probably all guess whose office this is. But do you miss something in this picture? What's missing? This is an office.
No people.
There are no people. And yes, it's beautiful. Look at all these stunning, wonderful features that make up part of this office. So the company have obviously spent a fortune. They've bought brand new Vespas just to turn them into chairs. Great expenditure on the right things. This is the same office. This is where the people work. So really, are companies spending money on the right places?
Yeah, and I mean, when we think about it, it is actually important that there is an attractive place to work. I mean, we personally believe that the design of the office isn't really going to be the main thing that drives the company culture. At the end of the day, it is the people.
I think that's very true, but if the people are miserable because they're uncomfortable, then it's very, very important that the environment supports them and makes them happy. A good workplace should really feel like a comfortable pair of shoes. They should make you feel good. They should make you feel excited and happy to be wearing them. it should be like your favorite item of clothing. It should fit and feel good.
And the trendy offices, you can walk in and they might make you say, wow. And that's actually great for attracting people because that is an important part, right? It's making sure that people want to come into that space. And it can be great for PR opportunities as well. These are all things that we recognize are important when it comes to actually getting people into the space. But as Larissa said, it really is about what keeps them there, which is more on the side of comfort.
Yeah, it's a more long-term approach. And really, in order to take a long-term approach, I think we really need to be more considered about what we're doing and more engaging with the people that occupy the space so that we really think about what is going to look good, feel good, and work. So there are a lot of aspects to what we need to do to make a great place to work.
Because at the end of the day, the goal really is to retain, develop people, and make sure that we're growing the organization.
This is another great example. This is an example that I love because as a designer, it's perfect. It's flawless. Everything is in the right place. Everything looks great. Again, what's missing? So I think as designers, we really need to start thinking about this. And I think our conclusion is that ultimately, to create a great place to work, the problem is if we're following trends or fashions, or if trends and fashion dominate, then culture and people can really suffer. Thank you.